start that. Okay, so first, like I said, thank you everybody for coming to this event. I know that it's not necessarily what we want with such a dynamic speaker that we'd love to see her in person, but I am very happy to bring Valarie Kaur here today. And I would first like to just thank our partners, because we have some amazing community partners that stand behind the work of Tri-Faith and also of Valarie. So the Tri-Faith Initiative is so very proud to have some truly wonderful community partners that have helped to share the work of Valarie Kaur and this program. And so I would like to thank the teams at Inclusive Communities, Urban Abbey, and the Plain State Region Anti-Defamation League. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Valarie Kaur. Valarie Kaur is a seasoned civil rights activist, award-winning filmmaker, lawyer, faith leader, and founder of the Revolutionary Love Project. She harnesses love as a shared practice to fight for social justice. She believes the way we make change is just as important as the change we make. In her new book, See No Stranger, Kaur asks, how do we labor for a world we want when the labor feels endless? She declares that revolutionary love is the call of our time, a radical, joyful practice that extends in three directions: to others, to our opponents, and to ourselves. It enjoins us to see no stranger, but instead look at others and say, you are part of me I do not know yet know. Starting from that place of wonder, the world begins to change. It is a practice that can transform a relationship, a community, a culture, even a nation. See No Stranger is a practical guide to changing the world, a synthesis of wisdom, a chronicle of personal and communal history, all joined together by a story of awakening. Revolutionary love is medicine for our times. It just might be our best chance for a collective future. And I just kind of want to sit with that for a moment, because I think that this program is exactly what we need on this day for those exact reasons. So Valarie, welcome to Omaha, and we are so delighted to have you, and I am so excited. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, everybody. I'm so grateful to be here with you. I wish it was in person too. And at the same time, I am grateful for the magic of this technology so that it can feel like, just for this hour that we have together, we can take a deep breath. We're not alone. So before we begin, I'll start with a reading from See No Stranger, but I just want to invite you to begin by putting your feet on the ground, on the earth. I'm going to do the same. Just notice the difference between holding your body up and letting the earth hold you up. Good. And now I invite you to take a deep inhale. Let it come. Let it go. You can close your eyes or lower your eyes and just turn to your own body with a sense of curiosity, a sense of wonder, as if you're holding a newborn baby and you just want to know what's happening inside you today, love. What are you carrying? It's a lot. It's a lot. Pandemic and uprisings and economic strain and Ruth and Brianna, the debate tonight, an election that will determine the course of human history. It's a lot. Just turning your attention even more deeply to those places in your body where you feel like you might be carrying a little bit of grief. Where might that be? Maybe it's your chest or your belly. Just find that spot. And very lovingly, with an intention of deep love, taking your hand on that spot and just almost as if you have the hand of a beloved. Right there. Good. Oh, we're going to do one more thing together, keeping your eyes closed, feeling your feet on the earth. I want you to imagine with me, imagine roots shooting down from the middle of your feet, Can you imagine that? It's big, strong roots shooting down from your feet deep into the earth, going down, 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 anchoring yourself in the earth. You feel that? You can relax a little bit more because the earth has you. Feel those roots going down, down, and now those roots start to reach out horizontally, and those roots are seeking out other roots, and those roots, there it is. The roots have found my roots. And our roots are entangling, and everyone who's here in this moment, all 75, some of us, all of our roots beneath the earth, entangled, holding each other. Imagine that. We are like trees in a forest. We look as though we are standing apart, but we are deeply interconnected. We are interdependent, and that means that we can give each other what we need and receive what we might need to receive, even if we're apart. So I invite you just to ask yourself, what do I need? What does my body need right now to be brave? Is it energy or rest? Is it wisdom? Is it love? What is it? Good, and just very, very slowly, just barely opening your eyes enough to write in the chat that one word, that one thing that you feel like your body needs, that hurt spot, that tender spot in your body. This is what it needs. This is what I need to be brave. And don't hit enter just yet. Just write it, type it in the chat. Good. Once you've written it, okay, on the count of 3, we're all going to hit enter at the same time. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, enter. Good. Close your eyes now, love. Close your eyes. And we're going to take some deep breaths together very slowly. And we're going to send you the thing that you need. Imagine the thing that you need is being sent to you through your roots, up into your feet, into your body, to that spot where you need it on every breath. Are you ready? Let it come. Take a deep inhale. You are receiving peace. Good. And let it go. And send what you can. Good. On the next inhale, let it come. You are receiving rest and hope and rest and hope. Good. You're receiving warmth, and hold it and let it go. You're sending what you can to all of us. Good. On the next inhale, a deep breath, let it come. You are receiving health and hope and connectedness and stillness and peace and calm and love and relief. Good. And let it go. And on the next inhale, take a deep breath, let it come. You're receiving family. Someone sent me some family right here, all disheveled and everything. Good, good. Take a few more deep breaths together, and I'm just going to, you want to say hi?
Hi.
This is Covey, everybody.
Hello.
We are all breathing together. Yeah.
Mommy,
Yes.
we're playing frisbee down there, and when I threw it very high, it landed so softly out there.
The frisbee landed on the balcony?
Yeah, did you
Okay,
see
why
that?
don't you run outside and grab it? And you can show everybody.
We didn't even have a meeting.
Okay. Open that. Yeah. So breathing together. You all sent me what I needed, didn't you? Just in that moment, missing my babies, and here they come. Yes. You want to show them the frisbee? All right. Yeah.
That's a nice frisbee.
Receiving, yes.
Dang.
Okay. You can close the door on your way. Thank you, love. Oh, just notice now. You may have opened your eyes just then. Just notice now the quality of sensation in your body. We did some breathing together. We had a surprise joy burst through the door. Just notice. Where's your breath now? That tender place. Well, how does it feel? Yes, sweet surprise. That's my mother, by the way. Oh, my loves, that's how we'll get through this, right? notice what we did together. We felt it. We were brave in feeling it, feeling what it's like in our bodies. And then we imagined ourselves connected, because we are connected through the earth. All of our feet are on the earth at the same time in this moment. In this moment, we are safe. In this moment, we are alive. In this moment, we are brave enough to feel it when we feel it together. We breathe together. We sent each other some love. And then we had our attention stolen by a bit of joy that I could have just been tried to like this, but you just got to soften and let it all in, right? Because what else are we fighting for but for them? So that's how we're going to get through this. That's how, breathing together, letting joy in. And I'm so grateful we're going to go deeper into what I call the practices of revolutionary love. Are you all ready to go deeper?
We are ready.
Amanda, should I start with a reading?
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you.
So everyone, this is the book, See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love. You can find it at seenostranger.com. And if you have the book, I thought I would read to you from the first chapter, which is called Wonder. And it's starting on page 24. And a little bit of setup for this story. The book is a tapestry of different stories from my life, from the stories of wisdom traditions, of social movements, the science of human behavior. It is quite a tapestry, but I think the most urgent stories are the ones I've just pulled out from my heart, from my own memory. And this one is from my childhood. I grew up in a very rural, conservative, mostly white, predominantly Christian town in the Central Valley of California. And I learned very quickly that to be Sikh and to be a woman and to be a brown woman of color, that these were problems that I could not solve. And I began to lose friends and teachers, and a best friend in particular who wanted so badly to save me, but I couldn't say the words. I couldn't say the words, accept Jesus as my only Lord and Savior. I couldn't say the words to make her okay. So all of this is sort of building in my mind and my body. And I remember sitting in the Gurdwara, in the house of worship, with my grandfather. My grandfather's closing his eyes and he's listening to the Shabbats, to the sound of our devotional scriptures being sung. And I couldn't listen because all I could think about were this. I imagined Lisa and my friends and teachers sitting in a church as their pastors taught them that we were primitive and pitiable and needed to be saved. If this theology hovered over the land like the breath of God, it was because those preachers were pumping it into the air. So here, this is my ferocious moment, right? The blood of my ancestors, my warrior ancestors are pumping through my veins, and my grandfather's eyes were still closed when I got to my feet and I ran out of the Gurdwara onto the street, past children on bicycles who stared at me, a brown girl in a silver kameez with clenched fists. I marched up to the church on the corner and knocked on the door. By myself, just boom, boom, boom. The church was locked. So I marched another block and found another church and banged on the door again. I heard organ music inside. The music stopped. The door opened. See, all this time I thought I was going to confront the preacher in front of the whole congregation. How could you send someone like me to hell? But instead, there was a white woman who stood in the doorway with silver hair and a flower-printed dress looking at me. This was not the priest I was expecting. The church behind her was empty. That's when I learned that these Christians definitely finished their morning prayers before we did. I thought of something to say. Excuse me, do you think I could sit and listen? I asked. My head was hot and dry. A breath. Of course, she said, and she let me in. You see, she was the church organist, practicing for a concert the following Sunday. I sat in the empty pews and saw the cross looming at the front of the church, the sign of my damnation. What was I doing here? I was locating the closest exit when she set her fingers down on the keys. Sound burst from the organ like 1,000 birds out of a tree. It lifted and swelled and echoed on the stained glass, making my chest ache. I closed my eyes and heard in the full-throated chorus of the organ the sound of the Vajja from the Gurdwara, rising and trembling like a gull in the wind. Maybe I was still sitting in the Gurdwara and hadn't left at all, but I was soaring higher and higher now, back through the ages or up into the heavens, I didn't know, and here was Jesus in the woodwork. Head bent over me, arms open, a smile that was sad and wide like the sea, And he was embracing me, and he became nothing, and I became nothing. And there were only the lines from his hands making an arc, weaving across the shimmering blue and silver canopy of the sky. The lines spelled out Ik, Om God, oneness. The music ended, and tears were pouring down my face. I tried to understand what just happened. This was my first experience of Vismad since childhood, that spontaneous moment of ecstatic wonder, the taste of oneness, sweet as nectar, the gift I had longed for. And it happened inside of a Christian church. What do you feel? The organist was looking at me. I remembered my mission here. I wiped away my tears and I gathered myself up tall. I saw this woman as every Christian, as every white person who had hurt me, who had made me feel like a dog and condemned me to hellfire. I just can't believe that there could be a God who would send me to hell, I said. There was a pause as she looked at me. She laughed. There was a sparkle in her eye, and I just started crying. She handed me tissues, and I threw my arms around her. Her name was Faye, and she was the first Christian I had ever met. And go on to meet many more people like her and learn that there were many ways to be Christian, just as there are many ways to be Sikh. Our treasure chests, filled with scriptures, songs, and stories, empower us to cast judgment, and others with the call to above all. There are no true or false interpretations. There are only those world we and those that create it.
Valarie, I hate to interrupt you in the middle of your reading, but you're cutting out. Oh no, and we've lost her. Just a moment. I am sure she is going to join back in, and we'll keep on rolling. Started. Valarie, I don't know if you want to join by phone, if that's easier for you with internet. Just there we go. Oh wait.
Is going to stop us. Oh, I'm so sorry. Child, internet failing, nothing is going to stop us. I'm going to give you, what is the last thing you heard, Amanda?
Oh my gosh. It was, I would say around the point of you having the conversation about what you were expecting and what you wanted to do when you first arrived there.
Oh dear, did you get my question to her?
Can we start there?
Yes. Okay, everybody, we're gonna catch up. So remember, I go to the church, I bang on the door, she lets me in. I'm trying to find a way out. She begins to play music. I start to have like my ecstatic revelation. And it's inside of, oh great. And she said, what are you feeling? Thank you, Alice. What are you feeling? The organist was looking at me. I remembered my mission here. I wiped my tears and gathered myself up tall. I saw this woman as every Christian, every white person who had hurt me, who had made me feel like a dog and condemned me to hellfire. I just can't believe that there could be a God who would send me to hell, I said. There was a pause as she looked at me. I was ready to fight. I can't either, she said. She saw my shock and explained, I think that there are many paths. It just doesn't make sense otherwise. Of course, some people don't agree. Then she laughed. There was a sparkle in her eye, And I started crying. She handed me tissues and I threw my arms around her. Her name was Faye, and she was the first Christian I had ever met who did not believe I was going to hell. I would go on to meet many more people like her and learn that there were many ways to be Christian, just as there are many ways to be Sikh. Our traditions are like treasure chests filled with scriptures, songs, and stories. Some empower us to cast judgment, and others shimmer with the call to love above all. There are no true or false interpretations. There are only those that destroy the world we want and those that create it. We get to decide which ones to hold in our hearts. Just as I chose to hold in my heart a vision of the Sikh faith that Papaji, my grandfather, had given me, so too Faye chose a vision of Christianity that saw me as beloved. You are not a stranger to me, Faye had said with her music and her embrace. You are a part of me I do not yet know. Sit down. Tell me who you are. We stayed there in the empty church and talked for a long time. When I returned, my grandfather was waiting for me at the Gurdwara under a great tree with roots knotted deep into the earth. Oh, there's one last piece I want to share together. My encounter with Faye, so this is when I was in high school. My encounter with Faye brought me joy and returned me to wonder at a time when I could have shut down. I could not have known where that wonder would lead me, that I would one day go on to study religion in college and in graduate school, that one day I would be invited to preach in an Episcopal church under a cross in Omaha and weep upon receiving the Eucharist from my friend Tracy, who is now a priest. I would go on to work at interfaith spaces and organize with faith leaders like Brian McLaren and Parker Palmer, progressive Christian thinkers whose books eventually reached my friend Lisa, who I thought I lost. There was no way I could have known that one day I would receive a Facebook notification that would reopen the exchange of letters between Lisa and me. 15 years after I thought our friendship was over, Lisa would reach out with an apology. She would still be Christian, and I would still be Sikh, but she would have long abandoned the particular theology that had tried to sever us from one another. She had gone on her own journey, encountered new ideas, knocked on doors that opened her to new wonders, and had eventually come back to our friendship. In the end, we learned that love was the way, the truth, and the life.
Thank you so much. And for people who don't know, the Episcopal Diocese was the original Christian partner in the Tri-Faith Initiative. So that connection is even deeper than I first realized when I read the book. So that is very awesome. Thank you.
Amanda, that moment was in the Church of the Holy Spirit in Bellevue. That was the first church that had invited me to preach as a guest preacher. I remember it was guest preacher Valarie Kaur on the door of the church, you know? I didn't even know if I would ever be allowed inside to hear guest preacher. And receiving the Eucharist was an experience that after my friend Tracy gave it to me, I just sat and I just was sobbing, sobbing. And she took me into her arms, and it was like the church back in my childhood where I experienced the revelation was folded into the church here and now. And it was such a loving embrace. It was so transformative. So when you all invited me to be with you all, I said, oh, the Christian community in Omaha has such a tender place in my heart. Anything I can do to be back with you all. Thank you.
Yes. Well, and I hope that the Tri-Faith Initiative and all of our community partners also have that warm place in your heart going forward. So I want to dive into some of the questions that I sent you earlier for our audience. First, could you give us some background on your intersectional identities? So you're a Sikh woman of color who is a mother and an activist and a lawyer. So how do those identities impact your commitment to justice?
It all springs from that first the foundation of Ik Omkar, the call to oneness that my grandfather gave me when I was such a little girl. Even the name of the book, Nako Beri Nehi Bagana, I see no enemy, I see no stranger. These are the words of Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith. And so this call to see no stranger, the audacity to look upon the face of anyone and say in our minds, you are a part of me I do not yet know, that is a dangerous path. Guru Nanak said, if you wish to play the game of love with me, step forth with your head on your palm. My grandfather used to say, love is dangerous business. In America, we like to say, I love you, I love you, I love you, all talk, no action. Because if I love you, if I choose to see you as my sister, my brother, my sibling, then I must be willing to let your grief into my heart. And I must be willing to fight for you if you are in harm's way. So the model in the Sikh faith was always the Sant Sipahi, the sage warrior or the warrior sage. The warrior fights, the sage loves. It is a path of revolutionary love. And when I was little and I received those first racial slurs and those attempts to convert me, and I felt so strange in my own body, my grandfather would look down at me and say, don't abandon your post. I mean, I was a little girl in 2 long braids who liked to ride tractors, look at the stars, but my grandfather saw me as a warrior. And I, Amanda, truly, I feel like my entire life since then, the 30-some years since then, my life has been an attempt to keep the promise I made to my grandfather. Right now, how many people are in harm's way? You know, if we see George Floyd as brother, Breonna Taylor as sister, then what does that call from us? What does that call from us? That calls us to risk it all for the fight for justice. And so, you know, you name these different parts of me, but really it's just all coming from one way of trying to be in the world and walk this path of revolutionary love that was laid out for me as a child.
That's quite the foundation to have. Yeah, it's I keep on reflecting on all of your words, and it just it's truly beautiful to me. Could you describe how those identities, because although they're one and whole for yourself, that for other people, they see different elements of you first, right? So could you explain how those identities impact your interactions with other religions, such as Judaism and Christianity and Islam?
Yes, well, let me say first that I feel like Sikh women in particular here in America are always fighting on 3 multiple fronts at the same time. We are fighting racism and hate violence from the outside world toward mostly our men, our brothers, our sons, who you just saw, right? Our husbands. And so we're keeping the family together, we're nurturing, and then we're also trying to fight in any ways we can to keep our families and communities safe. And then we're also fighting within our community because, as you know, the Sikh faith is radical in professing equality between women and men and people of all genders. It's really phenomenal in that way, marvelous in that way, revolutionary in that way. And yet, of course, Punjabi culture is steeped in patriarchy. And so there's a huge gap between the ideals that we hold in our hearts and are taught as children and the way that women and girls are treated in our community. And so the instances of domestic violence, of sexual assault and incest, the problems around traditional gender roles, all of those are what we are fighting also. So we're fighting racism from the outside world. We're fighting sexism within our community. And then here's to your question. We are also fighting invisibility, even inside progressive interfaith spaces. So for most of my life, every time I am invited into those spaces, it's always well-intentioned, and yet I'm just illegible. Is it Sikh or is it Sikh? Are you a blend of Hinduism and Islam, or are you something else? Like, what are you? Who are you? How are you? There's such little known that we often just have to start with Sikhism 101. And then we never really get past it because we're invited into those spaces. We have been as almost tokens, like we've checked on and off another box. And so what I have found is that so many years I spent in spaces that profess to be multi-faith, and yet they were really just Christian spaces with a couple of different people of different faiths inserted in. And so only recently, only the last few years have I become really bold to say, well, you can't call it multi-faith and you've set the table and laid the silverware. And when I sit down and start to move the silverware, you start to say, hey, don't touch that. That's not how we do it, right? If all the metaphors are Christian metaphors, if the music, if the format, even just everything else is Christian, then it's not multi-faith. So what might it be to invite us to create a truly pluralistic space, to allow us to bring Sikhi into how we gather, how we worship, how we talk about the divine, how we see each other? That is the exciting thing that I feel like is happening now in a way that I never saw it happen before. For so long, Sikhs have been seen by the mainstream community, if at all, as victims. And in fact, as an activist, I was just jumping up and down along with my fellow activists saying, look, we are being attacked, we're being attacked, and by the way, we exist. That was since 9/11, it was almost 20 years of that. And really since Oak Creek, the last 8 years, I feel like there's this sea change within our community where we are becoming more bold, saying like, no, we're not just victims trying to be known to the country. We are agents of revolutionary love. And we have something to teach the country. We have something to offer the country, if we may be so bold. We have something to offer about how to further how we understand race and justice and love in America. And I feel like once more and more of us in this younger generation is really doing it beautifully, like out in the streets, Black Lives Matter, Sikhs in turbans saying Black Lives Matter, right? We're showing you that our ancestors called for us to be defenders of the vulnerable and warriors against empire. And the more and more we're living into that, the more that all of our brothers and sisters, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, can benefit from having us at your side.
That is true. And as somebody who does work in the interfaith sphere, I've just seen, Sikhs advocating so much against anti-Muslim bigotry because of that, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because of that intersection. And that's something that I think communities like ours can learn more about, this interconnectedness and going back to that oneness, that the harm of one group of people is affecting all of us, right? So I think that, I hope that that's one of the points that we take away tonight.
That's why I love the Tri-Faith Initiative. I love that you are bringing all of these different communities together around these shared ethics of love and justice. I mean, you are embodying it right there in Omaha.
Thank you. So for a little bit a downer of a question, nationally and locally, we've experienced extreme injustice. And so it's from the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and James Scurlock here in Omaha, the school to prison pipeline, sustained threats of anti-Muslim hate crimes, and the rise of anti-Semitism. And so I titled the program Tending the Wound. And in order to heal this wound, we must name it. So what is the wound to you, and how do you articulate that in See No Stranger?
When you put your hand on your body a few minutes ago, maybe you put it on your heart, maybe your belly, you felt the wound, right? You felt it. I think the wound appears whenever we are ripped out of our right to feel at home in our bodies and at home in the world. And for those of us who are Sikh or Muslim or Black or Latinx or Indigenous or queer, that happens quite early in life. That we live in a culture that seeks to make us strange to ourselves. So we titled the book See No Stranger. So it's not just seeing others not as strange, but seeing ourselves not as strange. And so the voices that we hear in our heads, like you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not smart enough, you're not white enough, you're not enough, those voices, those messages appear very early in life. So the wound, it begins internally, right? And then of course we confront barrier after barrier, from policy to structure to institution, that deny us the full benefits of being safe and free in this country. And certainly the pandemic has exposed just how deeply unequal we've always been. And so that brings us to talking about the larger wound that has inflicted the United States since in its founding. We took a whole set of people and tried to eject them from their bodies, tried to rip them out of their sense of feeling safe and at home in their own skin, starting with the genocide Native peoples, and then the legacy of slavery, and then all of the atrocities that have followed and continue to bleed into the present. And so America will not be able to reconcile with itself until it does the work of truth and reparation, reconciliation, and apology. And that larger wound, to repair that wound, I mean, that will require deep energy and dedication and wisdom. So my invitation in See No Stranger is to start to find the spaces where we can practice this in our own houses of worship, in our own communities. It's going to be a while before the nation as a whole is ready, but we need to be ready for when the nation is ready. And it might be as early as 2021, when we as a nation need to be led through this process of reckoning and then reparation and so on and repair. So in the meantime, I've been really, really emboldened by church communities and faith communities who are doing the work. Like we are doing reparation work now. We're doing reconciliation work now. And then in our own lives, you know, how can we tend the wound in these ways? And so the book is really meant to be a companion. It's not just a memoir and manifesto. It's also a bit of a manual, you know, like these 10 core practices and teachings of revolutionary love, deeply researched. I mean, the endnotes, I think, are 40 pages alone. It was just like, we really wanted to give you the substance to say, these are the tested and tried and true practices for how to repair as community.
Absolutely. As you can probably guess, I loved your book. And I also found it incredibly brave for a number of reasons. And one of the first and most obvious ones for me was that you vocally call out and name the harm of white supremacy and capitalism in different ways. But then in a different, more personal way, you explicitly describe women's health issues that so many women face and are often ignored by the medical profession. And, but you just discuss it in such a personal and validating way. And I wanted to hit on that connection between womanhood and justice, and that just your deep connection to your body is revolutionary in itself, right? And so that all feeds into your thesis about revolutionary love. Could you explain why it was so important for you to connect specifically the stages of birth to the stages of healing societal wounds?
Yes. Well, first, let me say, I wasn't planning to write everything that I ended up writing in the book. You know, there's certain things that you just don't do, especially as a Sikh woman. You don't write about your body or about your cycle, or about your survival of assault. Like, there are things that have never been done in our community, and I wasn't even planning to lay it all out there until I got to the chapter called Rage. And I had to figure out, well, how did I learn that thing about rage? And when I realized, like, oh, I would have to talk about X, Y, and Z, then I went to my husband and I was like, just draw the bright line. You know, he's more private than I am. So like, just say I can talk about this stuff, but not about this stuff. I was waiting for him to give me the easy out, right? And to my absolute surprise, he said, tell the truth, tell the truth, tell the truth. Write the truth, write the true story first. And then when you're done, we'll come back and we'll read it together. We'll decide what stays in, what goes out. And so I did, acting as if no one would read it. And then he said, it all stays in. So it took a lot for me I had to almost like turn my own body inside out to be able to write what I wrote. And now I'm so relieved that I did, because there are women like you who are coming to me and saying, oh, this is the first time I'm seeing my story anywhere represented. And I just think that we, you know, my dear friend Lisa Anderson, a Black womanist thinker, has said, we cannot, the movement cannot happen on our backs or over our dead bodies. Not anymore.
Right.
And this is the feminist intervention. You know, how is it that our greatest social reformers, from Gandhi to King, you know, are beloved for what they did, what they taught us out in the world, and yet had such complicated, sometimes dysfunctional private lives with their families? Like, I can't do that. I can't. I need to mother my son and my 1-year-old daughter. I'm nursing her. Like, I want to keep my family together. And there's got to be ways that we can show that it doesn't take sacrificing your entire life and your relationships in order to fight the good fight. and to last. Like, I want to last. I want to grow old. Like, I want to be like Grace Lee Boggs one day. I want to be in my 90s, and I want to have fought for justice for decades. And so how do I do it? I can only do it if I'm practicing revolutionary love for others, for my opponents, and for myself, for ourselves. So those are the three parts of revolutionary love: others, opponents, and ourselves. And the ourselves is really the feminist intervention. It's Audre Lorde, it's bell hooks. You know, Audre Lorde said, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's a form of political warfare. So my son comes in, we give him the Frisbee, I'll be down at dinner, and I'm with you. There's a way to last. And I think each of us, we can, and the whole idea of self-care, I think we're going to talk about this, is such a fallacy, because we can never, you know, if we're just barely laboring, hanging on, we need a community around us. My husband is downstairs with the babies. Like, what does your community care look like so that we can last in the labor for justice for ourselves and for others?
Yeah. Could you just explain to us what revolutionary love is? You have a whole project dedicated to it, and that happened, you know, before your book came out, but I'm sure that there are a lot of people on this call right now who haven't heard of the Revolutionary Love Project.
Well, we are reclaiming love as a force for justice for a new time. Think about how love is usually talked about in this country. Like, it's a rush of feeling. It's something that we fall in love. Like, and I love falling in love. Like, there's a role for that in our life. But if that is the only reference for love, then of course it's not strong enough, not formidable enough to be a force. If you think about our greatest spiritual teachers, greatest social reformers through history, they always called for love. Loving beyond what evolution requires, right? Expanding that circle of love to include all of us. And when I think about our strongest relationships in life, think about your children or your parents, your friends. Love is more than a rush of feeling. Love is labor. Love is labor, isn't it, love? Here, listen to this part. Love is labor. It is fierce, it is bloody, it is imperfect, it is life-giving. It's a choice we make over and over again. And if love is labor, then love requires us to harness all of our emotions, right? Joy, this little joy, is the gift of love. Grief, the grief that we're feeling right now with how much we've lost, that's the price of love. And anger or rage, we talk a lot about anger, right? Rage is the force that protects that which is love. We have to harness our rage for creative action in the world. So revolutionary love, I'm telling them what revolutionary love is. Revolutionary love is when we are brave enough to see no stranger, to look upon the face of anyone and say, you are part of me I do not yet know. And when we do that, that means it's the choice to enter into labor for others, for our opponents, and for ourselves. And then we're giving people this idea of like, well, if love is labor, love can be modeled, love can be taught, love can be practiced. We can practice this together, everybody. So we're inviting people to kind of seed pockets of revolutionary love around the country, including houses of worship, where you might take, you can take this book or the framework that we built and start to put some of these practices into place in your community.
Which I highly recommend to everybody who's listening, because as I was, you know, asking people to be community organizational partners, I was explaining what your book is and why they should buy into it. And I just very bluntly said, like, she's all about love, but not that floofy type of love where it just lets everything go. It's the type of love that is there in joyous moments. It's when we're in grief. I think about the grief process, particularly in Judaism, because that's my point of reference, and that it goes beyond the Shiva, right? It goes beyond those first 7 days. And it's not only for the person that's grieving to mourn for that year, it's for that community around them to also be supportive, and that's what true love is. And if you can also have that internal self-love, then you can also reflect that out. So
yeah, to be clear, I'm a trained lawyer, so anytime anyone stood up and said love was the answer, I would just roll my eyes. I'd be out the door. You know, it's like, oh, thoughts and prayers, what? But the problem has never been with love the way that we talk about it in this country. And so what is so heartening is that we've gone through 4 years of nonstop assaults, you know, on our bodies, on our communities, on our mental health, on our souls, on our democratic institutions? What is the force that is strong enough to endure and to give us energy to fight the good fight, to really labor for the nation that is longing to be? And more and more people are seeing revolutionary love in the zeitgeist. Revolutionary love is the call of our times.
Mm-hmm. What are the steps to tending our wounds? Whether it's, I guess you can answer this about the individual level or on the societal level.
Well, you'll see in the book, it starts with rage.
Mm-hmm.
It begins with rage. And this took me a while to learn, because I was, as a South Asian American woman, I was always trained to suppress my rage in the name of love and forgiveness, that I was only as good or as polite as my ability to choke it down. And it wasn't until I broke my silence around a sexual assault, and my mother stood between me and the rest of the community and family and said, "Not my daughter. She will be free." Mm-hmm. And there was rage roaring inside of her, flashing in her eyes. Like, I'd never seen that kind of rage in my mother before. And she was teaching me how to harness your rage to fight for what is beloved and what is worth protecting. And if she was doing it for me, then I could learn how to do it for myself. Mm-hmm. And isn't that what's happening right now as we're seeing Black bodies in the streets? Isn't that what's happening right now as we're seeing our fires, 5 million acres burned to the ground here in California? Isn't that what we're seeing right now as our democracy is being tested, the Supreme Court? Everything we have held dear, everything we have loved so well and tried to protect is at stake right now. So if we're not feeling angry about it, then we're not unlocking our full capacity to be able to fight well. Mm-hmm. The trick is that women and girls are too often taught to suppress their rage, and men and boys are taught to let it explode, right? So I found a dance, Amanda, that we release our rage, our raw rage, in safe containers. We weep, we wail, we process, we do ritual, we let it out. And then we decide, once we're in relationship with it, we can decide, oh, what is that rage telling me? How do I want to harness it for what I end up doing out in the world? And that is what I call divine rage. Right? It is the rage flashing in Jesus's eyes when he overturns the tables of the money changers in the temple. Like, that is divine rage. And that's what we can do right now. That's what we must do right now. Grieve together, rage together, and then do more than resist, but reimagine the world that could be. And do you remember after this president took power, it was all about resistance? Yeah. It was like, we are the resistance. We had t-shirts, like, and I was so proud of how, bold we were, but I was also so deeply worried, because as long as we're just resisting, we're never the ones in power, and we're never actually changing anything. We're just surviving. I am really excited about this moment, the revolutionary moment that we are in, that so many of us now are reimagining what policing looks like in America, what criminal justice looks like, public safety. And it's not just those big institutions. Like, there's no institution on the face of this country that does not need us right now to transition it to become truly anti-racist. There's no house of worship. There's no faith community. There's no neighborhood that doesn't need you right now to do that hard labor of moving it, looking back, telling the truth about where we've been, and then doing the work of repair, and then holding up a vision of what it could be, what we could be. That is hard labor, and that is generational work, right? So how do we last? How do we last in the labor? And that's what this book is meant to support.
Right. Yeah. That brings me to my next question. Is over the past few years, we've seen a lot of marketing for self-care and self-help. But I think we can both agree that self-care isn't the type of radical self-care that those feminists of past and present and yourself are talking about. So what does that transformational self-care look like, and how does that impact our role in being able to tend the societal wound?
I'll show you what it looks like for me. And this goes back to your early question about why I use birthing metaphors.
Mm-hmm.
There you are.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug this phone in just so I don't lose you. So on the birthing table, there we are. We ought never be alone, right? We don't go to battle alone. We don't give birth alone. We need our midwives. And I just remember when I was in labor with my son, it was my mother by my side, my husband on one side, my mother on the other. And there was a moment when I was just like, I can't, it was a transition moment. It was the fiery, painful, dangerous moment. And I turned to her and I said, I can't. And she was already whispering the prayers that my grandfather had taught us. The hot winds cannot touch you. You are shielded by love. You are brave, she said, you are brave. And in that moment, I saw my mother standing behind my mother, and her mother behind her, and her mother behind her. I had this vision of this long line of women who had been in the same spot, who had pushed through the fire before me. And truly, that was the only way I could take a breath and push, and then my son was born. I think about that moment and how, what care looked like. There was no self-care in that moment. I needed my husband on one side. I needed my mother on the other. I needed the midwife. I needed my ancestors. Mm-hmm. That's the moment we're in now. This is unprecedented. It is convulsive. We are in a transition moment in human history. And think about it, in the United States, within 25 years, the number of people of color will exceed the number of white people for the first time since colonization. What we're experiencing now, it's not going to go away on November 3rd. This is a country that is at a crossroads. Will we birth a nation that has never been? In the history of the world, a nation made up of other nations, a nation that is truly multiracial, multi-faith, multicultural, where we see no stranger, that has never been. Will we birth it, or will we continue to descend into a kind of civil war with, it's a power struggle with those who want to turn America to a past where only a certain class of white people hold power. And with climate change, we're running out of time.
Yeah,
I see it. Look at this. Look at this. Will we marshal the vision and the skill and the solidarity to solve the problem of climate justice together, or will we perish? So this is, hang on, my love, this is a transition moment in history. So if you are feeling breathless right now, it means that you are awake. It means that you are allowing yourself to feel it. And this kind of, one body cannot bear this alone. This is a lot. You need your midwives. You need the ones who will take your hand and say, breathe, my love. And then let's talk about how we're going to push.
Yeah.
So I use birthing metaphors because, look, only a subset of men through most of human history have had the experience of going to war. But when we say, Amanda, soldier on, or become a warrior, like, we know what we mean. It's like the courage to fight the good fight. Mm-hmm. So too, only a subset of women have had the experience of giving birth, or giving birth that particular way. It carries wisdom that is available to all of us about the energy that it takes to create something new. Mm-hmm. And the wisdom of the midwife to breathe, and then to push, and then to breathe again. There's a certain rhythm, there's a certain cadence, and that you don't do it alone. And so while we're all in this transition moment together, I say, let's remember the wisdom of the midwife, right? How are you breathing every day? Mm-hmm. And then how are you pushing every day? And some people just need to find out how they're going to push, right? Some people like me just need to remember to breathe. I feel like I pushed for so many years that I had forgotten how to breathe until I had a chance to take time off and write this book. It was like the deepest breath I had in my body, because I could just be still and reach inside of me and give voice to what needed to be voiced. So every day now, we'll hopefully do dance time tonight. That's my deepest breath of the day. No matter how dark or difficult the day is, we dance with our children at the end of each day. So how are you breathing each day? And how are you pushing yourself in ways that you may never have before? Mm-hmm. Because we need you in the final days to this election. We need all of us to push like we never have before.
Yeah. While we're in the active process of tending the wound, and you're starting to hit on that it just gets so heavy. What are your maybe like top 3 or 5, I don't know, things that you want people to remember when that work does get so heavy, and like when it's time to take that breath, to take that pause? What are your suggestions on that?
I find that our body gives us a lot of information. And so even the way that we started was just like noticing the felt sense in the body. Like, where is your chest closed? Is your belly clenched? What's happening with your breath? What's happening with your palms? And this goes back to your previous question about how to tend the wound. I began with rage because we need to find some container for our rage, some way to express our rage. And some of us need to stay there. Some of us have a lot of grief and rage that we still need to process. And our bodies will tell us, like, if we think of an opponent and we're just flushed and we're feeling hot, then we probably need to do a lot of work here before we even think about reaching out to that person. But if we think of the opponent and there's some healing work that we've done, we feel a little settled, it might be time to do that labor of reaching out and listening to them, and then beginning the work of either forgiveness or reconciliation, or gathering the information you might need to reimagine the context that keeps them in power. So everyone has a different role at any different moment. And this is what I want to say. If you are someone who has a knee on your neck right now, it is not necessarily your role in this moment to look up at your opponent and try to love them, right, or tend to their wound. No, your role is to tend to your own, to stay alive, to take the next breath, to love yourself. That's the revolutionary act, to let love in. But if you are someone, by virtue of your white skin or your religion or whatever privilege you have, if you find yourself safe enough and brave enough to listen to those kinds of opponents, we need you now to do that work. It's work that I can't do right now, but you could do it, right? And the idea that each of us has a role, and it's about discerning, letting your body tell you what your role is at any given time. That has been really helpful. That's water.
That's not.
Okay. It's all wet. Something has happened. There's some parent that has not shown up, but we'll find out afterwards. So far, we're still having a conversation.
You know what? I think it just reinforces that first question that I asked about your identities, right? And it is oneness, that even though we're in this setting, that you're always a mother, right? And
I feel like we're just not pretending anymore.
I mean, it happens, right? I enjoy it personally. So before I get into my last
hang on. Yes.
Oh, there we go. Trying to make a show.
You can hear as long as I can keep talking to Amanda, Auntie, okay? Okay, thank you. Last one.
Yeah, before we get to the very last question, is there anything that we've discussed thus far that you kind of want to elaborate more on, or some parting words before we get into the Q&A from the audience?
No, I want to hear from people before I talk so much. Yeah.
Cool. So just, this is my final question on this. So first, just like, thank you for your wisdom and your bravery and your strength. I think that this is a message that so many of us need to hear, but haven't found the correct resources to look into. But this question is slightly different. What makes you happy right now?
Go, you want to show, what are you drawing? Something, is it a surprise? Having Kavi's 5 and Ananda's 1, and having children this small, at first I was just like, oh, I wish I was single. My time could be my own during the pandemic, and now I'm real, because I'm laboring all of the time, nursing baby, I'm with you, then dinner, then this, and it's from 5 a.m. when one baby gets up to 9 p.m. when he goes to sleep. and before I really resented it. But maybe you can get dinner set up downstairs. So we'll let that play out. But then I realized that they're too small to have me explain what's happening in the world. So I just have to read them stories and sing them songs and do dance time and make the day magical. And before I thought it was all just for them. And now I realize like, oh, it's for me too. And this thing about joy, it's not just for those of you who have access to small children who are innocent, but I think joy is available to each of us. Mm-hmm. And we feel guilty about when we experience joy, when so many people are suffering, when it is this dark, when it feels like game over, when we couldn't even see the sun because the sky was orange here for so many days. The apocalypse is like a felt sense in the body. What is joy? How dare you even ask me to think about feeling joy in a time like this? And I've come to understand that joy returns us to everything that is good and beautiful and worth fighting for. Joy is our greatest act of moral resistance. Mm-hmm. What is it for if not this and them? So that's what, it's not just what makes me happy. It's like, question is like, can I have the wherewithal to protect the time and space in the day to create the conditions for joy to enter? Because I can't force it in me. It doesn't come. I have to create the conditions. And I'll leave you with this story that on the last, because we're having another election night coming up, right? The last election, as the results were coming in, the horror was closing in on my throat. Kavi pulled on my sleeve and he said, "Dance time, mommy?" And I'm just like, on a night like this, I'm not gonna dance? And my husband's like, "Your rules." Because I said every night. So we turned off CNN, we turned on "Baby, You're a Firework," and Kavi like jumps into my arms. Remember this? You're jumping into my arms and throw me up, mommy, like boom, 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 even brighter than the moon. And Kavi's laughing and I'm laughing and he's dancing and I'm dancing and we are dancing on election night. And after he goes to sleep, I felt it in my body, right? It's information, but I felt it in my body, this rising kind of sparkling energy. And I thought, oh, I'm going to be okay. Because I'm going to last. I'm not going to let this administration rob me of my watching my child grow up. Yeah. Or moments like this where I can feel this is what I'm fighting for. Joy gives us energy for the long labor. And it's long and it's hard. And I've come to realize that I may be laboring for justice until I'm 90-some and then passing it on to him. But the labor is not just a means to an end. The labor for justice is an end in itself when we labor with love. Because when we labor with love for others and ourselves, then we let joy in. And laboring for justice with joy is the meaning of life. That's what I've decided.
Thank you so much. I know that you've given us all so much to think about and to hopefully implement into our daily lives. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Holly. She is one of the lovely volunteers from Inclusive Communities, and she's going to serve as a moderator for the questions that people have put into the chat. And I've been kind of watching as they have come in, and they look like some pretty great questions. So, Holly, I'll give it to you.
Thank you. So thank you so much, Valarie. I enjoyed your book very much as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's some really big questions. I know we don't have a lot of time. There's some really big questions in the chat. And
we do have about 20 minutes because I did schedule it until 7:30, so you're good.
Perfect. Not to be selfish, but I'm going to be a little bit selfish for a minute and start with one of my own, because we are in Nebraska, and I think that there's a lot of assumptions sometimes in these types of circles around inclusivity that most of us want a different president or see a lot that's wrong with the administration. And I happen to fall in that camp. But you were talking about listening, and people like myself, are probably in a position to listen. And I want to listen to my friends and my neighbors and my family, frankly, who has very different feelings, and trying to understand those feelings. But I also want to make sure that I'm not somehow validating or furthering the energy behind the hate that comes up sometimes when those feelings are expressed. So what advice do you have to help us all in this revolutionary love to spread that feeling of abundance, where yes, we can listen and I can hear some of the pain, and someone who might be afraid of, as you talked about, the nation turning less and less white over time. How can we, when we listen, provide them, those people that are afraid of those things, of loss and lack of abundance, how can we give them faith that it's going to be okay? It really is, and we're all in this together. Do you have any advice that would apply?
First, Holly, I just want to say you are brave, my love. I witness you. That is hard labor, and it's labor that I am not doing right now. I can't do it right now, and I need you to do it. And so the fact that you are sitting down and having those hard, painful conversations, that's frontlines justice work. And we need you to stay in it. We need you to last. And I want you to think about how to take care of yourself in the process, because it doesn't happen overnight. The true transformation I've seen with people I have engaged, it has never been in a single sitting. It's multiple sittings, and it's over time, and sometimes it's over years. And this is generational work. And so don't judge your effectiveness by how quickly you are persuading another person in what they believe. Judge your success by your faithfulness to the labor. Will you still be listening? Will you still be listening after November next year in 2022? And remember, the goal of listening is not persuasion, actually. It's understanding. It's understanding. And this is why, I talk about this in the book, that I have sat with white supremacists. I've sat with prison guards and soldiers and former abusers. And every time I want to hate them, every time I want to leave, I make myself stay. I check my body. Is it safe enough? Am I brave enough to keep staying? Mm-hmm. And when it is, I stay. Sometimes I make the mistake and it's not, but I've learned now more and more. I stay, listen, and every time it happens, beneath the slogans and the sound bites, I start to hear their story, and I start to see their pain, and I start to see the wound in them. There are no such thing as monsters in this world. There are only human beings who are wounded, people who do what they do or believe what they believe out of their own sense of insecurity or anxiety or greed or blindness, whatever it is. And so the idea of being able to see their wound and tend to the wound means that we're gathering information, understanding for what is causing the wound. What radio programs are they listening to? What TV? Who's putting the guns in their hands? What is radicalizing them? And what institutions are authorizing them? And then when I have my activist hat on, I gain information so that I can be a smarter fighter. I can be a smarter activist, right? I'm not going after, I care about unseating this president. I care much more about changing the conditions that put him into office in the first place. And so I have to be savvy, and that understanding work is so necessary for us to fight the good fight. But that understanding work is also transformational, can be, between you and that person. Because I'm hearing, you already know that they're human beings because they're your family, they're your friends, they're your community members. So the more that you sit and listen and lead with wonder, every time you feel like you just return to wonder. You don't have to feel empathy. You don't have to feel compassion. Those things can follow the act of wonder. Keep wondering. You have a story and I need to hear it. I need to hear it. I need to hear it. And what ends up happening is that when you listen that well, people know. People can feel it. Oh, she really wants to know. She's really wondering. And then they might start to wonder about you and ask you questions and want to hear, and might be transformed by what they hear. And they might, over the course of many sittings, widen their horizons in such a way that
hey, look, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid. I don't think progressives have done a very good job of showing people that the vision of America that we are holding up, it has a place for you too. It has a place for them too. So you have to do that work, you know, showing them that there's a place for them too, and helping them grieve, because their grief may not be justified, but it is real. It is real. They are grieving the notion that America belonged to them, the idea that it was only for them, and it never was. And it's okay if they're grieving an illusion. They need someone to help them grieve it. I always find that leading with when you're helping them see that it's going to be okay, you know, lead with stories, like show them, give them See No Stranger. Have them hear some of us speak, have them know that Black Lives Matter doesn't mean only Black Lives Matter, right? It means the only way that all lives will matter is if Black Lives Matter in this country, because then we know justice is real. So I think exposing them, inviting them into stories, and staying in relationship over the long haul, and then taking lots of breaks in between for yourself to tend to yourself so that you can keep doing this labor for us. And then maybe come 25 years, well, a critical mass will be with us, being able to embrace an America that we've never seen before. But I see it, you see it, right? And show them, and then we live it.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So another question that has popped up is, do you practice some type of yoga love? And I will not pronounce things correctly. Is it sutras or santras? I don't even know. But that's the question.
Oh, I don't. You know, in the Sikh faith, yoga is not a traditional practice in the Sikh faith. But so instead I have, but all of our scriptures are devotional poems. It's all devotional poetry. There's no sermons or stories or rules. It's all poetry of love. So in a way, every time that I am singing the Shabads, or I'm playing it on my Gilraba, my instrument, right, Gavi? Gavi knows my instrument. Then it's a way of returning to thinking about oneness as the wellspring. But every one of us has our own ways of returning, right? And I say, go into your own faith traditions. Inside every faith tradition has a mystical current running throughout it. And so I find those to be the most powerful sources to remind us of our interconnectedness and give us energy for how to live into that, and what we do, what we say, who we serve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Question came up earlier. Someone asked, do you think that equity in multi-faith spaces requires that Christianity take up less space?
Yes. Next question. Yeah, right. It's similar with white supremacy. If you have a dominant group that has been dominant for so long, so much so that people can't even see it, then it's about, well, what does it mean to make space, to support? And it doesn't mean that you don't have a role. I think so often white people are like, well, I should just disappear now. I want to be woke, so I'm just going to disappear and let the Black and brown people lead. I'm like, no, actually, we need you. We need you. And our Indigenous community has said, we need you not just to be allies, we need you to be accomplices, to conspire with us to break these chains of oppression, because you have access to resources, you have platforms, you have privilege that we need you to wield alongside us. And oftentimes it means following our lead, but it may be taking less space in terms of like leading it all, but your role is so essential. We can't get there without you. And the same thing in Christian spaces. Like we need all of you to open up. I mean, the Sikh community doesn't have the infrastructure that the Christian world has, for example. Our first Sikh women warrior retreats, these series of retreats called My Pago retreats I was doing for other Sikh sisters, were held at Montreat Conference Center in Asheville, like a Christian center, because we don't have retreat centers. Like they were opening up their doors and allowing us to innovate inside of them. And sometimes like that means changing them. And so I think just to honor, yes, taking up less space, but finding that and knowing that your role is just as essential, even more essential than before, for true equity to be realized. You'll know if you're in relationship, if you're in real relationship, true relationship, sincere relationship and you cultivate those relationships with people of other communities, then you'll get the information you need to know what to do now and next to move your institution along.
another question was, how does a South Asian American woman make a stance in leadership when everything is a space for white women?
This, you know, you invite me in, I say yes. You put me in the center and allow me to speak from this particular wisdom. I'm grateful. So there are a couple of ways. Either I go into spaces that are set by others, and where I know I'm not a token. I know that I'm being asked just to offer some real wisdom and leadership, or I create my own spaces. And that's what the Revolutionary Love Project was. You know, as a lawyer, I realized, I looked at my civil rights community and I thought, you're all fight, which is amazing, but like, where's the heart? And then I looked at my interfaith, like spiritual community, and I said, oh, you're all heart, but where's the fight? So we've created this revolutionary love. Like, this is the heart and the fist. This is like the deep, you know, spiritual grounding and the precision and knowing how to challenge and dismantle and reimagine institutions of power in this country. And the good news is that there are more and more and more of us who are operating this space, and groups from both sides who are saying, oh, we need this. More than ever, we're seeing, oh, we need the heart. And more than ever, we're seeing, like, how do we show up in the fight? So,
the beach.
yeah, oh, it's beautiful.
You know how I made so many dots?
How did you make so many dots? Next question.
Okay.
It's the other side.
Oh, that's why. You did a beautiful job.
This one's going to be our last Q&A before we wrap up the whole event.
Okay. All right. So one more. Thank you for that last answer. I would also just say to that person, there are people ready to listen. So as you were talking about speaking up, I would implore them to do that as well, because there are lots of us that are interested in their story and who want to hear and want to put them front and center. So I would say just start talking. One more question, and it's so timing is perfect with your son there. Can you speak on activism and motherhood and where they coincide?
Where do they coincide?
She did on a white glass, remember?
I see it.
White glass.
Yes. Well, sometimes they clash. Bye, love. Bye, thank you. Yeah, I want to be honest. The needs are hard. Like, you can't physically meet both needs at the same time, like fully. Like, I feel like you feel like you're never doing well. Like, I'm never completely here with you, and I'm not completely there with them. So there's this narrative of failure that you're just, and until I finally realized that, like, oh, I should stop feeling like a failure, stop feeling guilty, because it is impossible. It is impossible. And I've let go of perfection as the metric. And instead just presence and showing up, and presence and showing up. Mothering children and mothering the movement at the same time is really difficult and feels like impossible labor. And yet it is possible when you have community of care, when your metric changes, you know. And I think honestly, I feel like I've never felt more powerful as an activist since I had children, because it's so much easier for me to discern, like, what is, like, flashy, between what is flashy and what makes a spectacle versus what is actually going to make the world safer for them. And before, they were all conflated, and now it's very, very clear. And this is why, like, I remember after 2016, my watch night address went viral. It was like 40 million views, and I never had the public spotlight so on me before. And I had all these inquiries, like, show up here, speak here, be there, 1,000 inquiries. And I left the country. I said no to everything, and I left the country because I felt like I could keep showing up and I could say the same thing over and over and over again, but that wouldn't actually make the world safer for my children. I needed to go deep, and I needed to come up with a framework for how to labor with love and how to last. And that's how I started writing this book. And now I'm back and I'm like, oh, I wrote this book for my survival so that I can figure out a way to, I didn't know it was going to get so much darker between the pandemic and the uprisings and this election, but I feel like I have tools now. I know how to grieve. I know how to rage. I know how to protect joy. I know how to grieve. I know how to breathe, and I know when and how to push. I didn't know that before. I knew it, but I didn't know it. And now it's here, right? And so this book is for anyone who also wants to last, especially if you're mothering and trying to show up in the movement at the same time. Longevity is the key. Longevity, like don't be the supernova, be the long burning star. You know, and that's a different kind of energy. It's a different kind of wisdom. In a way, it's ancient maternal wisdom, isn't it? To last for ourselves and our children and the earth.
Yeah. Thank you. We all needed this, I think, and need that book. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to Amanda. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Holly.
Just one quick point of reflection, all of that talk about generations and children and mothers and ancestors, it just reminds me and reinforces the concept of Lador, which is generation to generation within Judaism and us passing everything down. So just, you know, finding that connection within my own faith community is really.
Yeah, I want to be a good ancestor one day.
Mm-hmm.
And I never had that frame, that metric for what I do and how I show up until I want to be a good ancestor one day. And if that is my metric, then I don't have to judge my life based on outcomes. Yeah, I care about outcomes, but I measure it by my faithfulness to the labor. And if I'm going to be a good ancestor one day, I want my son to be able to summon me the way that I summoned my grandfather and feel bravery in his body. Not my fear, not my trauma. I want him to feel brave. So who is going to summon you one day? How do you want them to summon you? And what do you need to be doing now in your life to be brave with your life so that you play that role?
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Wendy Goldberg, the Executive Director of Tri-Faith, and she's going to give you a little teaser about an upcoming big event for us.
Good evening. Thank you, Valarie. Thank you, Amanda, for your incredible preparations and passion to bring Valarie here tonight. And to Valarie, thank you for your grace and your calm that you showed us as someone in the fire, right? And how you navigate, how you showed us tonight with technical issues and a child at foot, what beauty looks like. So thank you, thank you. And remember that little critic doesn't get you when you get off this phone. You are a wise woman and you shared with us everything we needed to know tonight.
Oh, how did you know exactly what I needed to hear? Thank you.
So I'm holding those words very tight. Yes. So we have a very special event coming up, and it is on October 17th, and it is the celebration of our completion to co-locate a church, a mosque, a synagogue, and an interfaith center, a very brave endeavor. And on October 17th, a local playwright, who is on this call, Bo, and Tessa, a filmmaker. Bofield Barry Fisher and Tessa Wedberg have worked tirelessly to listen to the stories of faith and of love and of meeting a stranger in brave spaces. And they've created an original performance that will be shared nationwide on October 17th. And I want to make sure that none of you who understand how important this fight is miss that evening. It is a milestone for us in the Tri-Faith Initiative, and it promises to be a beautiful evening. So please register, and please know that we care that you bring your sister and your brother and your mother and your colleague and your neighbor and everyone to that moment for us to celebrate together and to fight the fight. Thank you. Hold this with you in the next few hours while we go watch what's going to be hard to watch. Remember that breath and let those roots seep into the earth and feel all of us with you. We're standing together tonight. Thank you both very, very much. Take care.
And thank you to all the attendees and our wonderful program partners. Once again, Inclusive Communities, Urban Abbey, and our local regional ADL chapter. So that concludes tonight, and I hope you all had a great time.
Take care.